Snowflakes drifted lazily through the glowing street lamps of the city as Ethan Carter, a man admired in boardrooms and feared by rivals, walked hand in hand with his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. It was Christmas Eve, and while the rest of the world rushed home to warmth and family gatherings, Ethan carried the heavy silence of a man who had gained everything money could buy, yet still wrestled with the emptiness left behind by a broken marriage. Lily, full of innocent wonder, skipped beside him, her laughter piercing through his thoughts like bells on a frosty night. They passed storefronts alive with wreaths and glittering lights, the kind of scenes people painted on postcards but rarely lived in real life. Suddenly, as they turned a quiet corner near the park, Lily tugged at his coat and pointed toward a bench dusted with snow. There, huddled in worn clothes, lay a woman cradling a little girl no older than Lily, both asleep beneath a tattered blanket. Lily's eyes widened as she whispered with concern, "Daddy, why is she sleeping here?" The word struck Ethan harder than any hostile boardroom negotiation ever had. For the first time in years, he saw not the city's gloss or his own success, but the raw fragility of life lying helplessly before him. Ethan froze, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air as his daughter's innocent question echoed in his ears. He knelt beside the bench, brushing snow gently from the sleeping child's small hand. Her fingers were icy, her cheeks flushed not from warmth but from the bitter cold. The woman, likely her mother, stirred at the movement and opened tired eyes, filled with shame and desperation. She tried to apologize, to sit up, to explain, but her voice cracked under the weight of exhaustion. Ethan, the man who had built an empire through calculated risks and relentless ambition, felt something stir within him that business had never awakened. An urgent responsibility, not for profit, but for people. He looked at Lily, whose eyes shimmered with both fear and compassion. In that moment, he realized this was more than an encounter, it was a mirror held to his soul. All his wealth, his towering home, his chauffeured cars, none of it could justify walking away. Lily squeezed his hand and whispered, "We can help her, can't we, Daddy?" Her words dismantled every excuse forming in his mind. Ethan nodded slowly, a lump tightening in his throat, and extended his hand to the woman. "Come with us," he said, his voice softer than it had been in years. The woman hesitated, tears welling, before placing her trembling fingers into his. In that fragile connection, a decision was made, one that would change all of their lives forever. The car ride back to Ethan's mansion was quiet, yet heavy with unspoken emotions. The mother, who introduced herself as Grace, held her daughter close, as if afraid someone might take her away the moment she let go. Lily, in her sweet, unfiltered innocence, kept leaning over to show the little girl her stuffed reindeer, hoping to coax even a tiny smile. Ethan watched through the rearview mirror, his mind racing faster than the snowflakes tumbling across the windshield. He had always measured success by quarterly reports and rising stock prices, but tonight, those numbers felt meaningless compared to the sight of a shivering child slowly nestling into the warmth of his daughter's kindness. When they arrived at the house, the grand foyer with its glittering tree and roaring fireplace seemed almost foreign to Ethan. He noticed the awe in Grace's eyes, but also the embarrassment, as though stepping inside a palace only magnified the chasm between her world and his. Without hesitation, Lily took the little girl's hand and guided her straight to the fireplace, declaring with all the authority of a child, "This is the warmest spot." Ethan watched as the girl's face softened in relief, her eyes finally closing not from cold or exhaustion, but from safety. In that instant, Ethan realized this wasn't charity, it was humanity, pure and uncalculated. And as Grace whispered a tearful thank you, Ethan felt something stir deep within, a reminder of the man he once hoped to be before wealth and loneliness clouded his heart. Later that evening, as the smell of hot cocoa filled the air and carols hummed softly from the speakers, the once quiet house bloomed with unexpected warmth. Lily sat cross-legged on the rug, teaching Grace's daughter, Emma, how to hang ornaments on the lower branches of the tree. The two giggled, their laughter mingling with the crackling fire in a way that made the mansion finally feel like a home. Ethan stood back, watching with arms folded, his heart wrestling with emotions he hadn't felt in years. Grace, sitting on the edge of the couch, seemed torn between gratitude and disbelief. "You didn't have to do this," she murmured, her voice breaking. Ethan looked at her, truly seeing the exhaustion etched into her face, the resilience in her eyes, and he shook his head. "No one should have to sleep on a bench in the cold. Not on Christmas. Not ever." Grace blinked, as if the words were too heavy to accept, and confessed quietly how she had lost her job, then her apartment, and how she had fought every day to shield Emma from despair. Ethan listened, his chest tightening, realizing he had spent fortunes chasing ventures while people like Grace and Emma were left unseen in the shadows of his city. For the first time, he felt the sharp sting of responsibility, not as a businessman, but as a fellow human being. When Emma tugged on his sleeve and asked if she could put the star on top of the tree, Ethan lifted her gently, placing her high enough to crown it. As the golden light glowed across their faces, he felt something he hadn't in years, hope, fragile but fiercely alive. As the night deepened, Ethan found himself unable to shake the thought that this encounter was no coincidence but a calling. Long after Lily and Emma had fallen asleep beside the fire, Grace sat quietly at the dining table, her hands wrapped around a mug she no longer drank from. Ethan joined her, the weight of his own silence pressing heavy. "You've carried so much alone," he said gently. Grace's eyes brimmed with tears she had tried so hard to hide. "I had to," she whispered. "When you're a mother, you don't get the luxury of giving up." Her words hit Ethan like a revelation. For years, he had believed resilience came from boardroom battles and late-night deals, but here was a woman who embodied strength in its purest form, sacrifice, survival, and love. Ethan suddenly realized that true wealth had nothing to do with the balance in his accounts, it lived in these quiet, uncelebrated acts of courage. In that moment, he made a decision not just to offer temporary shelter but to ensure Grace and Emma would never again face the cold of uncertainty. "You and Emma deserve more than a single night of kindness," he said firmly. "Let me help you rebuild, not just for today but for tomorrow." Grace looked at him with disbelief, then with the kind of gratitude that carried both relief and hope. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a profound clarity, as though all the empty victories of his past were leading to this single act of meaning. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting the living room in soft gold. Lily and Emma were still asleep, curled together under a blanket like sisters who had always known each other. Ethan stood quietly in the doorway, feeling something stir within him that no contract, no profit margin, no mansion had ever given: purpose. Grace approached, her voice hushed with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." Ethan shook his head, a gentle smile spreading across his face. "You don't owe me anything. The truth is, you've given me back something I didn't know I'd lost." Grace tilted her head, puzzled, until she saw the sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't talking about wealth or recognition, he was talking about humanity, about the simple but profound truth that we are meant to care for one another. As the girls stirred awake and began giggling at the morning light, Ethan felt the house fill with a joy that had long been absent. It wasn't just the joy of Christmas, it was the joy of connection, of kindness, of rediscovering what really matters. Over breakfast, he promised Grace that he would support her as she found work, as she regained her independence, as she gave Emma the stable life she deserved. And in return, Grace gave him something money could never buy, a reminder that love and compassion are the greatest legacies one can leave behind. As the day unfolded with laughter and hope, Ethan knew that this unexpected night had transformed not just Grace and Emma's future, but his own. And in the end, the greatest gift was realizing that the true measure of a life well lived is not what you achieve for yourself, but what you give to others.